The next item of business is a debate on motion number 5379 in the name of Stuart Stevenson on climate change. I invite members who wish to speak in this debate to press the request to speak buttons.
Thank you. I call Shirley-Anne Somerville to be followed by Desmond Nulty.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Copenhagen Conference has been billed as the most important international conference for a generation, and rightly so. There is a great deal riding on the decisions made by the men and women who have the responsibility to deliver a fair and binding agreement which will prevent the world from careering headlong into a man-made catastrophe. Other members have already spoken about many of the facets which must be included in any legally binding agreement, but I'd like to initially focus on just one of those: adequate finance for mitigation against and add up to climate change in developing countries. The Prime Minister has proposed that $100 billion should be raised globally per year for such a fund. That would certainly be a very welcome step in the right direction if it can be globally agreed, and it is good to see that the UK Government has been taking a lead on this issue. However, NGOs such as Christian Aid believe that developed countries must go further than this, and that indeed a sum of at least $150 billion is what is actually needed. I hope progress like this can be made in Copenhagen. But of even more concern is the UK's proposal that 10% of such climate financing should come from the international aid budget. Such a move would be retrograde and unacceptable. Climate finance is, after all, compensation for developed countries who have got rich by jeopardising the sustainability of the planet. It must not come at the expense of an already overstretched aid budget. Now, while I won't be travelling to Copenhagen with some of my committee colleagues, I am pleased to see that the Minister will be attending to take part in events which will focus on our own ambitious climate change framework. With this Parliament having passed some of the world's most ambitious legislation, it is only right that we should have the opportunity to set out our proposals to others on the world stage. Because the world is watching, and those taking part in the negotiations need to hear clear examples from countries that have set tough and challenging targets. This is an area where Scotland is and should remain an example to the rest of the world. And it is therefore unfortunate that the UK Government has not taken this opportunity to provoke the Scottish Parliament's Act with pride on a world stage, to challenge others to raise their game, as Scotland has done, by allowing the Minister to take part in the official UK delegation. However, despite this recent decision, I am pleased that the Minister has said in the past that he has a good working relationship with his Westminster counterparts. I very much welcome that, as progress towards Scotland meeting its ambitious climate change targets will be directly influenced by a range of measures that are either reserved to Westminster or are governed by EU-wide regulations. For example, the emissions reductions targets for the EU ETS, the largest carbon trading scheme in the world, are of course set at an EU level, while key fiscal levers to tackle climate change, including vehicle excise duty, fuel duty, driver licensing, speed limits on motorways and landfill tax, are all reserved to Westminster, while responsibility for road pricing, smarter transport measures and transport infrastructure are generally devolved. These are but a few examples to demonstrate how we must all work together constructively across the Parliament and across political divides to deliver real change. The motion we are debating today rightly recognises that we must now focus on practical implementation. With the powers that the Scottish Government has, I am pleased that steps are being taken towards meeting the ambitious targets that have been set out in the legislation. Firstly, with heat generation responsible for no less than approximately 50% of current energy demands in Scotland, it is pleasing that the Renewable Heat Action Plan will ensure this topic gets the attention it requires. Although progress in this area will also have to rely on action at a UK level, with the Renewable Heat Initiative planned for 2011. But by targeting information at high heat users, by developing skills, investing in renewable heat installations and taking a number of other measures, the Scottish Government is making a welcome contribution to expanding the role of renewable heat. By 2020, the amount of heat use in Scotland coming from renewables will be over 11%. That is welcome, as it is up from the present level of 1.4%. Secondly, but on a similar theme, the funding for microgeneration has been tripled, another measure which will help householders, small businesses and communities play a role in meeting climate change targets and, importantly, creating jobs. Thirdly, I welcome the continued good news stories generated by the Climate Challenge Fund, yet another investment in community innovation to tackle climate change. Edinburgh benefited to the tune of £1.2 million in the most recent round of awards, including £750,000 for the bike station, who help employers to help staff cut down on their car use, and £340,000 to support Edinburgh University in taking student and staff cars off the road. Local examples, but with forward-thinking projects up and down the country also benefiting in the same round. Finally, as we look forward to debating the budget next week, we should welcome the Scottish Government's carbon assessment of the implications of the budget. If we are to expect and demand a change in approach by businesses, communities and individuals, it is only right and proper that governments too cast a critical eye over their own actions and their own policies. This is another welcome innovation and truly world-leading. In conclusion, Presiding Officer, I join those urging, indeed demanding, an ambitious agreement from Copenhagen. I support the Government's call for a renewed focus on practical action and continue to support the leadership that the Government has shown in this regard.